Hello, I hope you all had a happy Valentine's Day and a good weekend so far. Today I'd like to share a technique I call cousin bundling, where we're going to capture the DNA of one or more cousins, the DNA that they share with a particular target ancestor of that cousin, without having the cousin's raw DNA. So for example, in talking in the abstract, let's say I have my kit and my brother's kit and maybe some first cousin kits that all descend from a grandfather. Well, we're not going to reconstruct the grandfather. Rather, someone else that we don't have the raw DNA for, perhaps a descendant of my grandfather's brother or sister, has their DNA on GEDmatch or somewhere else. We're going to reconstruct a kit for my grandfather's brother using my grandfather's kits, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we won't actually be cloning the cousins kit. Rather, what we're doing is extracting the relevant portions of DNA kits that we do administer to perform the reconstruction. Um, One way to think about it is in terms of like the Lazarus method for reconstruction, um, sort of backwards. And so, for example, if you're starting out, or we can easily determine the segments that are shared between the cousins, the group one and group two people. Um, and we can easily, and we already have the raw data of the group two people. We're sort of creating group one. We're sort of solving for group one, if you want to think about it that way. So I just received some new kits on the Scandinavian side of my family over the last few weeks, and I found some more in my email that I didn't realize I had. So I'm going to use that side of the family. I'm going to use this technique on that side of the family. We'll be using, I think we're up to 18 donor kits that I've collected the raw DNA. And I've used lucid charts, what you're looking at on your screen, for the recommendation of one of our group members, and I like it. I still got to learn how to use it a little better, maybe to get a little faster at it, but I do like it. I thought it was very intuitive. So this is a chart of how all of these raw DNA kits are related to me, and how some cousin matches who have not shared their raw DNA with me, how they're related to me and to all the targets of interest and related to the family. Um, there are two cousin matches that we're going to be solving for, and that we're going to call them Mr. T and Mrs. M. They are not brother and sister or husband and wife or anything, but we're going to call them Mr. T and Mrs. M for purposes of this demonstration. So I've color-coded the nodes in this diagram as follows. I'm going to expand it a little bit here so you can see. Let's look at the portion, my portion of the screen here. I'm one of Helen's descendants. Helen is my grandmother. Okay, so it's coded in green for those family members who I've either obtained raw DNA from, or who I've successfully reconstructed using DNA from those individuals. So like here, there are 3 descendants of Helen. And that's me, my brother, and one of my uncles. And then we have a reconstruction for Helen. I have a 61% stereo kit that I created using that data. And then I have each of Helen's sisters who also didn't live long enough to test, but one of them has 3 descendants that tested, another has 2 descendants that tested. Actually, I think that should also say 3. I think this may be using 19 kits actually. Okay. And then based on those, based on Nada, Selma, and we'll call her Sally, I think it's Nada, Sally, and Helen, I was able to combine those and create a stereo 54% kit for my great-grandmother, Marie Windblad. Now I've also reconstructed kits for Marie's brother Anton and her brother Otto. And because many of their descendants have tested, 3 descendants of Anton and Otto's granddaughter. Okay, and guess what I did next? I went back a generation further since we got siblings, and Jason Lee just did a great talk on sibling summation. You can see this is really what I'm doing. I'm taking it back, and when I get more than one sibling in a generation, I can generally take it back a generation further. Okay, so then I have Johan Edvard Vindblad, which we're going to do the Norwegian side in this presentation, and his wife Salmeen, and I've done reconstructions of both of those. The reason I have them a different color in this chart is because I have not added Anton's data to Johan and Salmin yet. I just haven't gotten around to it. So we're going to have to treat Anton as a separate node in this diagram. But we'd have to treat them, well, I'll get into that in soon. But they're stereo anyway, Salmin is, so I'd have to deal with the different clades separately anyway. Because only mono kits can be used as building blocks. That's a general rule. Okay, so then we also have something similar going on over here with, on the far left, we have Peter Olsen, and they have different names because different last names, even though Petersen is the maiden name for Salmin. Peter's birth name is Olsen because it was right around the time when they adopted surnames in Norway. So the older siblings went by Olsen because their father's name was Ole, even though he was Ole Matthias Petersen. But the youngest sibling in this case is Salmin, and she went with Petersen because by the time she was born in 1862, they were using surnames in Norway, or at least in her part of Norway. So she ended up going with Salmin Petersen, not Olsen or Olsdottir, I guess would have been the convention prior to that period. So anyway, they're full siblings, and that's all you really need to know. And I'm not even sure you really need to know that for this. And just like we did on my side, we've got Peter has, we have a couple intermediate reconstructions there that are in green, and we have Jenny Olsen had a granddaughter that tested, and Perry had a granddaughter that tested. And those are living people, and I have the raw DNA. Now, let's get to orange. Orange is for family members that have uploaded to GEDmatch, but for whom I do not have raw DNA. And that would be Mr. T and Mrs. M. So we have Otto's second grandson, and Otto's a second, so the siblings at this level are Peter, Otto, Lena, and Salmin. Okay, and that's the four children for which I have some data on for Ole and Thea. Okay, so Otto's grandson, we're going to call him Mr. T, a second grandson. So that's one orange, and we've got another orange here under Lena. So I haven't reconstructed Lena yet, and we are going to, the line's a little bendy, but she has no relation, she's only a parent of Leif Jensen here, and Leif's daughter is living, and we're going to call her Mrs. M. Okay, and so you see what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to accomplish turning these red boxes, the red nodes are for individuals that I have not reconstructed and who are not living to test. So that's Leif, Lena, and Otto. And I'm not going to do it in this video, but also, of course, Ole and Thea. When I'm all done with all these, I'm going to sum them all together and hopefully have some nice reconstructions even at that level. In the early 1820s, there should be some solid, good coverage reconstructions. Okay, so there are also some black boxes here you see for Anna Maria and for Andreas, and I'll get into that later. There's a reason for that, and that's important for the process that we're going to talk about. And two of the kits that I'm counting in my count that aren't on this chart are not descendants. Rather, one of them is a descendant of Thea's aunt, and I also am using a sister of Ole Petersen, whose name is, I want to say Oline. Anyway, we're using descendants from outside of this chart, and that's all you got to know. So when I end up doing the using my tools, you'll see some extra names in the resource list, and that'll be who they are in addition to the reconstructions that we're going to use. We're not going to use the DNA of any living people in this. We're going to only be using mono data. All right, so in fact, this method will only work on mono kits. So if you have to use phased data for this exercise. I'm going to start with a reconstruction of Otto because that's going to be a simpler process than reconstructing the two nodes on the Lena Olsen branch. So on the Otto branch, we only have Mr. T. That's Otto's second grandson. And then from him, we're going to create Otto. And there's not much else to do there. So that's the easier of the two problems. The primary Borland genetics tool that we're going to use for this task is the extract segments tool. And this is important because the extract segments tool, as I just said, only allows you to extract segments from phased mono DNA kits. So no real kits here, only synthetic ones. What we're going to do is we're going to extract the matching segments from the mono reconstructions that we've already been done, that I've done before I made this video, and I've been working on them since October. And we're going to see where those kits match Mr. T, and then we're going to merge them into a single mono output kit that will effectively represent Otto Olson, because it'll be the ancestor of Mr. T, by which he's related to the rest of this family tree. So if he's related to them in more than one way, or we're going to get to that in a later part of the video, but I will address that. But suffices to say that Mr. T is only related to this family in this one through Otto. Okay, so let's start identifying from the diagram which mono reconstructions we should use for this process, because we want to compare Mr. T to both Otto's brother, Peter Olson, and to the sister Salmine, okay? So let's look at Peter. Well, we have a stereo reconstruction of Peter, so that's no good, right? Because you can't use extract segments with a stereo reconstruction. It's only 9%, but if it's stereo, that means there was some overlap, and it's got more than one SNP reporting, at least somewhere in there, and that'll screw everything up. So we've got two mono kits, so we're going to do each of them separately. We're going to do Jenny, and we're going to do Perry. Okay, so that's the first two. And if we go over to Salmine's side, there's Salmine. Hers is stereo, even without Norman. Well, I told you already what we're going to do. I'm sorry, without Anton. We're going to use Anton's because he's mono, right? We're also going to use Otto's mono data. That's another easy one, right? Because he only has one person that was used to create that, and it's on her mother's side only. But when it comes to Maria, we're down to stereo again. So what we can do is, if we really want to, then we go down to the next level, and Nada, Sally, Louis, Helen, they all are stereo because, and we're not going to go down to the living people. So what I did was, when I reconstructed Salmine, I kept all the intermediate building blocks, and I actually have a file called Salmine Marie. Her nickname was May. Salmine May Clade, and we're going to be using that phased file, which doesn't have the it's mono and doesn't contain any information from Otto. We'll do so we can do them separately. But I saved that. And I dragged it into the folder that we're going to be using, into my demo folder. I saved that when I was doing Salmine's initial reconstruction. So to sum it up, we're going to be using Jenny, we're going to be using Perry, we're going to be using Anton, we're going to be using Salmine's May Clade, and we're going to be using Otto. And then we're also going to use the two outside relatives as well, the cousins via and Old's siblings and uncles and aunts, descendants. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got to create a DNA painter profile for this task, and I'm going to call it Project Otto Olson. So I haven't actually done that yet. Let's sign into DNA Painter, and I'm going to create a new profile, profile 4 project. Well, let's call it, so we know what this project is all about, Otto Olson cousin bundling. Okay, and is this person male or female? And then we're talking about Otto here, he's male. Save and start painting. Correct in the description, I'm going to be using build 37 data, and I always like to keep track of that. Okay, so we're going to do one-to-one comparisons between Mr. T and each of the 5 reconstructed monokits and the others on Genesis, on GEDmatch Genesis. And let's go over there, and I am going to click on this because it's been a while since I've actually into Genesis and make sure I'm still logged in. And I am. Okay, so we're good. Okay, so Mr. T is RP. There we go. And if you're wondering, well, that's a Lazarus kit. I'll explain that later. But yeah, I've created a Lazarus kit for Mr. T as opposed to using his real data. You don't have to do that, but I did it for privacy reasons here. So then kit number 2, well, let's start at the beginning of our chart here and jump right into Peter, or rather Jenny. Okay, so looking at my chart here, and we want to do position only because we're going to be copying and pasting into DNA Painter. We want build 37, dealing with phase data, so 505 is fine. We want to eliminate hard breaks, always do that. Okay, submit. Okay, so Mr. T and Jenny do not match each other. And remember, not every person's going to match their cousin at this level of distance. So let's move on to the next one. Let's replace Jenny, and we will go with Perry. And that's UU56143325. Okay, submit. And there we go. And again, if we look at the chart, there's Perry right there. He's the number 2 on our list. And he shares 2 segments. So let's copy them. Go to DNA Painter, paint a new match, paste, kill that down to 4. That way it allows in 5, anything with over 4. Save the match now, and what we're going to call this is we're going to call this Otto Olson Perry contribution. And we don't really need to, oh, well, that's the match name. Let's just keep it the same for the ancestor name. Save match. And there we go. Got some segments there. Now let's go to the next one on our list. Who was that on our chart here? Let's add Anton to the mix. And so I'm going to go back here. And I've got my list UI4571146. Okay, so there's Anton's kit number UI4571146. Submit. And Anton's got some good segments here. So let's add another match, paste, save the match now. We'll call it Otto Olson Anton Trip. Okay. And we'll also paste that down into the group name. Take a look at the match. Where is he? So, oh look, so this one, overlaps the other one, but this one's a whole new segment. So we're getting some unique information with each cousin, or at least those cousins that actually match. So who's next on our chart? We've got, that's my video recording tool. Okay, we've got Salmine May Clade we want next. So let's take a look. Let's compare to Salmine, and I am going to try to do extra hard to spell this correctly this time. CH9249973. Okay. And again, these are all people that are long gone, except Mr. T, of course. Let's see. Copy and paste the new match. And enter the name of my match. It's going to be Otto Olson May Contrib. Paste that into the ancestor name. Save match. Okay, so now we've got May, Anton, and Perry. Next on our chart, we have Otto, Z948894. Okay, does it match Otto? Yes, Mr. T matches Otto. So, paint a new match, save match now, and that's going to be Otto Olson, Otto contrib, and I'm assuming that Otto Windblad was probably named after his uncle Otto Olson. Let's see. Paste the name here and save match. All right. Looks like there might have been just a lot of repeating there. But anyway, now we're going to do the other more distant ones, and I don't know if they're even going to match Mr. T, but we'll give it a shot. And so I'm going to start with okay, this one's for a Terrier Hammer. Doesn't match. Okay, so that's easy. Now, let's do the last one, Oline. Oline Dolan, Oline Peter's daughter Dolan. And that is the last of the outside cousins. 76525. Is that right? No, too many numbers here. There we go. Okay, submit. And okay, so that doesn't match either. So for this case, we only have 4. So we have 4 out of the 7 possible groups mapped onto Otto Olson's chromosomes successfully. At least all the 4 that matched him. Now let's export the data to a CSV. We go to the settings. We go down here to all segment data. Then we click on the top, CSV file. And like magic, we get a DNA Painter export. And then I am going to, I have my downloads here. That's the export. And I'm going to move them over into a different window. I'm going to move them into the demo window that I created specifically for this. That's not it. Let's be this one for this project. Okay. Here we go. Move it to cousin bundling. And there he is right underneath Chris Christopherson's. That's I did his before I made this demo to make sure that it actually works. Okay. So now let us close this and go into Borland Genetics. I figured out how to give it an icon that looks like the logo instead of the silly floppy disk things. Okay, so let's go. Let's go to the creeper first because we got to get it to that folder. And from the creeper tool, we can adjust the settings. Otherwise, it's going to be looking in my default folder. The settings. Adjust the settings. We go to the folder cousin bundling. Copy the address up here. Paste it here. Directory 1 are zipped out files. I don't know how about downloads. And then apply the changes. Let's apply it to all future sessions because I may have want to go back to this. And I could always change it back later. So submit. All right, we get the notification that the changes were successfully modified, and I continue. I don't need the creeper for anything else right now, so I'm going to close out of it and go back to the regular toolkit. Give it a second because it has to close the windows nicely. It's actually doing quite a bit of thinking. Okay, creeper successfully deactivated. Now we will go into the resource manager and load resource list. And yep, we're in the right folder. We're in the cousin bundling folder because the setting was changed. Okay, so demo resources version 1, and you'll see we have the kits that I administer, and there should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, so we've got Jenny. I said I was going to do Anton, but I did Norman. It doesn't really matter on our chart. Let me just go back to that and show you why it doesn't matter. Because all 3 of Anton's descendants go through his son Norman. It's not on this chart, but that's why I'm using Norman as a proxy for Anton. I could have used Anton, but for whatever reason, I don't happen to have that in my resource manager. We're not going to let that stop us. Okay, so back to the main menu. We've got everybody home. Now let's go to the extract segments tool. And we're going to one by one, we're going to select the kit. Oh, first of all, which ones did we do? We did Otto as the first one on our list. So let's go Otto and Vlad. That's the source of the DNA. That's going to be where we're extracting the data from. And then we're using build 37. We're going to use the Otto Olson cousin map. And we're starting with Otto contribution. Select and take a minute. Otto's male, continue. So now when we go back to our resource list, we're going to see him right there. And it's Otto Olson, Otto contribution. Don't get scared when it says 0%. That's rounding. And there are only a few segments, but hopefully when we add them all up, we'll get something a little more complete. Okay, back to the main menu, and who's the next one on our DNA Painter list? We've got Otto May contribution. So let's go to the extract segments. This time we're going to choose May, or a proxy for May. It's Sal means May contribution. Select, and build 37. And again, the Otto Olson. We've got the May contribution legend entry we're going to select. And let's see. Okay. And Otto Olson is still a male. Continue. All right, let's take a look at our resource list. See how we're doing here. Oh, we got 1% out of May. Okay, back to the main menu. Let's extract, well, let's see who we're extracting this time. Next one is Anton. Okay, so manage DNA resources. No, I'm sorry, extract segments tool. And we're going to choose Anton. And again, we don't have Anton here. We're doing Norman as a proxy for Anton. Select, build 37. And that's going to be the same thing. And this time we're going to choose Anton's contributions. Now while this is going, let's see who the next one on our list is. The last one is going to be Perry. So I'm going to fly through that because I'm all ready and I know what I'm doing. Okay, mail, continue, extract segments. I go to Perry. Then we're going to go to the build 37, select the file, Otto Perry contribution. Wait one more time. I wonder if Perry probably just an Americanization of Per. Yeah, common name in Norway means Peter. Okay, Otto's still a male. Okay, so now let's go back to our resource list and see we got all four. So we got 4 Otto Olsons now, 0, 0, 1, and 1. So go back to the main menu. We're going to use the Humpty Dumpty tool. Now, since these are all on one side of Mr. T's family, we know by definition it has to be a mono kid. I mean, he's either related on his mother or his father's side to Otto Olson. So we're going to choose the merge to mono because it's all on one side of Mr. T's family. So they must at most, be on only one copy of his chromosomes. Select. Okay, who are we combining? We're combining Otto Anton, Otto May, Otto Otto, and Otto Perry. Okay, select. Shouldn't take too long, it's not that much data. While it's doing this though, let's just go over one thing. I created these kits so they're all on the same template. If they're not, you'd have to use the chameleon to make sure they're on the same template before you started doing this method. Well, I guess you wouldn't have to do it before you start, but before you merge anyway, because the merge to mono requires that all all the composite resources are on the same template. By template, I mean like the same testing company or whichever SNPs that testing company measures. Okay, what's the name we're going to give him? Let's call him Otto Olson. Continue. Okay. Well, now let's go to our manage resources and see what we have. There he is up there, Otto Olson, 3%. So that's not bad. Let's go to our view and export segments just to make sure it's the segments that we wanted. We'll take a look at Otto Olson. Give it a second to load. And that's what we've created. I mean, it's not everything. It's 3%, or it's of this particular copy, set of copies of chromosomes, it would be 6%. So that should look like this, right? If it worked, it would be all of these segments combined, and that's precisely what we have here. And I didn't do the X, but in this case, it doesn't matter because that would require male to male. It goes through 2 males, so there isn't going to be any X in this scenario anyway. Okay, so now let's return to the main menu. We don't need to repaint this in DNA Painter. That's what the export does. We already started there. It would be full circle. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it all over again, and I'm going to reconstruct Lena Olson. And this time around, I'm going to speed up the video sometimes, so we don't have to watch us go through the whole thing again. but there's a reason I want to do her in addition, because it's something I want to discuss. And that is those two black nodes for Anna Maria Jensen and Andreas Havig Jensen. And can anyone guess why they are problematic? What we had here is we had two siblings marry two siblings, which happens a lot. So two of the Olsen siblings married two of the Jensen siblings. So we need to account for that, because unlike Mr. T, who is only related to my family or my DNA lines in one way, Mrs. M is related to the people here in two ways. She's going to be related through my line, which is the part that I'm trying to reconstruct. I'm trying to reconstruct Lena specifically. And she's also going to have some Jensen DNA from that side of the family. And how do we deal with that? Well, what we're going to do, instead of using Jenny and Perry, because Jenny and Perry also have Jensen, right? So if we compare Mrs. M to either of those, we're not just going to get the Olsen parts necessarily, assuming they even match. We're also going to get some Jensen potentially. So what we're going to do, since I did Peter, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Salmine and May, and that when I created Peter, I created a Peter Perry clade, and I created a Peter Jenny clade that only have Peter and have no Jensen in them. And instead of using the straight up Jenny and Perry, I am going to use Peter Jenny clade and Peter Perry clade, which has no Jensen. So I'm going to do the exact same process. I'm just switching out which of the kits I'm going to be comparing to. And what if I didn't? What if I did keep the Jensen in as well? Then who would I be reconstructing? None other than Leif Jensen. What I would be doing is I would have, Mrs. M is Leif's daughter. I would be constructing some portion of her father's side, because it would only be Jensen's and Olsen's and not her mother's. So that would be some part of her father Leif, but not necessarily limited to the DNA she inherited from Lena. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it in fast motion. And this only we do the same thing, all the comparisons, and let's see how it looks when the tape's sped up. Okay, so we've got Lena reconstructed now at 7%, which is pretty good. And that's because Mrs. M is a generation or two closer to the source. So let's go to segment view export. See what it looks like. So we got not bad here, 7%. And in terms of how much of the black space we've painted yellow, that's 14%, because we're only looking at one copy of the of Mrs. M's chromosomes here. So I'd say that's a good day. 7% of Lena, and then we've got 3% of Otto. But now let's talk about what we have actually accomplished here, because I don't think it's necessarily obvious. The reason I say that is because we have added no new DNA to our universe available for reconstruction. So if the goal was to reconstruct the top of the chart here, let's go back to my family list. There it is. If the goal was to reconstruct Ole and Thea, We're not adding any DNA to that list. All of the DNA that we did in this exercise, or that we use in this exercise, we already had. And not only we already have it, we already had it phased. I mean, because the extract segment tool only used on phased data. So we added no new data to their reconstruction, right? Not exactly. So let's take a look at the first case, the first use case for this tool. And that's when there's more than one relative in a branch of the family that are not sharing their raw DNA. And actually, I'm going to let you in on a secret here. There is no Mr. T. Mr. T is actually two people, and I combined them using a Lazarus kit. So this is a case of that. So rather than have kits, for each cousin that you have to remember their names and who they are and whatever, worry about if they're going to erase their data someday or something, you have a single kit that bundles not one cousin, but any number of cousins as long as they're in the same branch compared to the rest of the donors. So that is one case where it's useful. So Mr. T is actually more than two people, or more than one person, and we've actually done that here, even though we didn't get that much of them because they're young. They're younger generations compared to Mrs. M. Okay, so if you can get a decent percentage of a reconstruction using a bunch of GEDmatch cousins, and create, say, a 30% reconstruction or so at the level of Lena, Otto, Salman, and Peter at that first level, you'll get a clearer picture to the crossover or recombination points among the siblings for visual phasing purposes. So to take back to the next level for visual phasing, it always helps to see where blocks were broken and where they weren't in siblings. So consolidating cousin matches into at the sibling level, at that top level, at the level of top level of siblings, by bundling up cousins underneath them, makes it easier to see which siblings recombined where and where the recombination points are. So you're going to have more accurate boundaries when you're visual phasing to create Ole and Thea. Okay, so that's use case number one. And to sum it up, you won't have access to more phase data, but you'll know more about the phase data you do have from a segmentology perspective so that you can better use the data for more distant reconstructions. Okay, second use case, and that relates to Johnny Pearl's what are the odds tool. So when you add multiple cousins within a distinct family clade or branch, you can add the reconstructed relatives to the what are the odds tool and use the data to try to pin down the unknown parents of, say, maybe adoptees or whatever that Ole and Thea's descendants that are related to Ole and Thea, and you're trying to figure out how they're related, how they fit into your tree. So I'll probably demonstrate in a future episode when I've had time to play with the what are the odds tool, how we're going to do that, because I have a lot more opportunities for this bundling concept in general in all the different branches of my tree. And I also have a lot more cousins that I don't know how they fit into my tree. Okay, the third use case is actually pretty neat. You can use this method to do cross-platform reconstructions. What does that mean? Say your cousin, or maybe more, a couple cousins and this happened in my family. I descend from my ancestor. I have a great-grandmother from Lithuania. Her name is Eva Daus, or in Lithuania it's Eva Dauste. She had a brother or an uncle, Michael Daus, Nicholas Daus, that came to America, and he had two of his descendants test, but they tested on family tree DNA. They didn't upload to GEDmatch, and I haven't been able to really get in contact with them. I don't know their emails. So, and anyway, I don't want to always be bothering everybody to give them their DNA. So what can I do? Well, nowhere in this process did I actually use the DNA kits for the donors themselves. All right. Okay. Well, let's put it this way. I never had their raw DNA. There's no reason they had to be on GEDmatch. The only thing that I found useful in GEDmatch was I got the segment data by being able to compare with the donors. So if I have my great-grandmother, if I have her kit up on FTDNA, which I do, I could just as easily figure out the reconstructed, which segments to choose just by doing a comparison there. I think you have to pay like $19 to process, but then you can spit out a CSV that you can import into DNA Painter. You might have to change the columns or cut and paste or whatever, but regardless, the DNA data, the segment data is there. So what you do is you've essentially captured and bundled the segment data from those two cousins, um, and then use this process, and you can upload it to GEDmatch. And where you had no cousins on your segment search in GEDmatch or with my HIR mapper tool or whatever to assist in the mapping and phasing process, you've got a proxy for those cousins. You've got the portion of those cousins that you care about, the parts that are related to my great-grandmother, on GEDmatch now, and you could treat them just like you would any other GEDmatch kit. So it allows you to not just do cross-platform comparison, because GEDmatch already lets you do that, but if they don't upload to GEDmatch, it lets you upload the relevant parts to GEDmatch, so that you can include them in your analysis as needed. Okay. So to sum that one up, you can take advantage of GEDmatch's tools, segment search, and you can also use segment search data with my HIR mapper tool to accomplish a wide variety of reconstruction tasks when people have not even uploaded to GEDmatch. And the exception there would be Ancestry, because they don't give segment data. Well, okay, that's it for this week, and I hope you all got something out of this. And I know actually doing the process was quite boring because there was a lot of downtime while the tools were running. But I sped up the tape, and hopefully when you're watching this, it'll flow a little better than it did in real life. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, or you can start a discussion thread in our Facebook group. And I'll see you next week.